Alrighty. Well, thank you once again. My apologies for that little bit of a glitch. Want to thank you once again for those that are just joining us, for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to the presentation, to be here. For those that may not know me, my name is Julio Jordan, and as of March of this year, I actually started working on a part-time basis with Disability Rights New York, and basically working with the organization to address the same thing that I kind of do in my day job, is to address the inequities, to address more from a transitional housing. The actual premise of it is creating new avenues for advocacy in the fight for safe and accessible transitional housing, and to focus on BIPOC communities. So that's what I've been doing with the organization. And we're basically just trying to identify strategies to address barriers to accessible transitional housing, and really work with the community to make sure that everyone is being addressed and everyone is being spoken for. So one of the things that I'm trying not to do is I don't want to do all the talking, but I'm going to do most of the talking. But at any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to type your questions in the chat. There will be a Q&A at the end. So you will be able to, throughout, ask any questions. And I appreciate that. I won't always have the answers, but I will get you the answer. One of the things that I pride myself on is not giving out information or just speaking without really not knowing. So if I don't have an answer, I will be sure to get that answer for you. The purpose of this presentation is just to give you some information about Disability Rights New York and the services that we provide. And if you know anyone that could benefit from our free legal and advocacy services, then you can provide them with the information or try to connect them with us. I will have the contact information there. So if you're not familiar with DRNY, one of the questions you may have is what is DRNY? So Disability Rights New York, there's offices in Rochester, Albany, and Brooklyn. So I'm going to play a video to give you a little bit of a more of an understanding. But DRNY is a non-for-profit organization. We protect the civil and legal rights of all New Yorkers with disabilities. Our purpose is to ensure that individuals with disabilities are treated equally with dignity and respect, as we all should be. DRNY hopes to create an inclusive world that provides equal opportunity for individuals with disabilities, one that is free from discrimination, abuse, neglect. In an ideal world, if we were able to reach that goal, and I like the way that our chief, our director, executive director in charge, Tim says, his goal, and I think for disability rights in general, is to not have to be needed, because all of these things are being addressed. So that would be, one of those things that would be great to get to that point. So I'm going to play this video.
Did you know there is a nationwide advocacy system to protect people with disabilities, and that it was created right here in New York State? Abuse and neglect of people with disabilities is a dark stain on our national and state history. The exposure of Willowbrook in 1972 was the catalyst for the disability rights movement, initiating several acts and programs into legislation. By 2013, Disability Rights New York was designated as New York's Protection and Advocacy System and Client Assistance Program. What do we do? DRNY is a private nonprofit that provides free legal and advocacy services to individuals with disabilities, both seen and unseen. We have the unique authority to monitor programs that deliver services and investigate allegations of abuse and neglect. As the only organization with this authority in New York State, our goal is to help our clients exercise their own life choices and fully participate in community life. How are we different? There are many organizations undertaking disability advocacy in New York State. However, We are the only organization designated by Congress to identify rights violations and advocate for systemic solutions. We are not a state agency, nor are we a part of the government. But we do fight to give a voice for those who are hidden, abused, and neglected throughout the state. Under the following programs: CAP, PAT, PABS, PAD, PAMI, PAIR, PARP, PATB, and PAVA, DRNY works to address discrimination affecting New Yorkers. If you want to learn more about DRNY, please visit our website, www.drny.org, and follow us on our social media platforms.
So hopefully that gives you some insight as to who DRNY is, what DRNY stands for, and why we're here today. So I'm going to flesh that out a little bit more. DRNY is part of the overall protection and advocacy, which whenever you see the initials P&A, stands for Protection and Advocacy System for People with Disabilities in the U.S., was created back in the 70s as a result of, and if you have not seen it, I would definitely encourage you to watch the Geraldo Rivera back in the 70s, did an expose on Willowbrook, which was a school in Staten Island. And really, if you all know Geraldo Rivera, you know that he's one of those individuals that really gets in, and he did a powerful video. The conditions that the individuals that were at Willowbrook, that they were being kept in, were so shocking that it started a national conversation about the need for better protection and services for individuals with disabilities. The national conversation resulted in Congress passing the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act in 1975, ironically, the same year I was born, which we refer to as the DD Act. The DD Act offered states federal funds to protect the developmentally disabled if they created a protection and advocacy state agency for the developmentally disabled, or if they designated a nonprofit as their P&A. Originally, the P&As could only protect and advocate for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but since the passage of the DD Act, Congress has expanded the protect authority and responsibilities of the P&As on several different occasions. So today, if you are an individual with disability, any disability, and you have a legal issue related to your disability, you are likely eligible to receive services from DRNY. And one of the things that I want to stress is that DRNY, regardless of your economic state, financial, regardless of where you live, it's a free service to everyone. And that's one of the things that I definitely want to stress, is that it is a free service. There is no fee, no charge for any of the services that DRNY provides, and I'll be going over a lot of those services coming up. So the P&A system itself exists in every state and territory. So 57 total, with the territories and the states. Most are nonprofits, 7 are state agency protection and advocacy services. P&As are the largest provider of legally based advocacy for individuals with disabilities in the country. So the P&A and CAP provider in New York wasn't always DRNY. New York's P&A from 1978 to 2013 was the Commission on Quality of Care and Advocacy for People with Disabilities. It was a state agency, and it contracted with different nonprofit organizations to represent people with disabilities in New York. In 2013, the governor of New York decided that it would be in the best interest of New Yorkers with disabilities to redesignate the P&A and CAP program to a nonprofit. There were a few reasons why this happened, and it was to support a more coordinated and constant statewide P&A and CAP program, to eliminate any perceived conflict of interest with having a state agency looking over other state agencies, and to allow the P&A and CAP provider to be more flexible with its resources and to be able to explore other financial resources for which a state agency wouldn't be able to take advantage of. There are some grants that nonprofits can apply for that state agencies cannot. So DRNY was started in 2013, and the organization has grown and carries out its P&A and CAP responsibilities, like I said, from Albany, Brooklyn, and right here in Rochester, New York. One moment. New York P&A's 1978 was the Commission of Quality and Care, as I mentioned. 2013 is when DRNY became, and those are our offices. So who we are is basically lawyers, advocates, intake specialists. The staff at DRNY and carry out the P&A and CAP responsibilities is comprised of lawyers, advocates, which is what I am, and intake specialists, all of whom play a critical role in ensuring that we as an organization do our best to support all of New York with disabilities, all of New Yorkers with disabilities to the best of our ability. As far as language access, we work to ensure that our services are accessible to all. For individuals whose primary language is other than English, we provide interpretation and translation services. The interpreters and translators that we provide ensure that there is effective communication between us and our clients. We have some individuals on staff who can interpret and translate for certain languages, and where we don't have someone on staff who can interpret or translate for a particular language, we utilize interpretation and translation services. American Sign Language is another interpretation service that we offer, and we have individuals that are on staff and working to ensure that all our available recourses are available in ASL. Here at DRNY, we are currently working to get our fact sheets translated into other languages so that important information contained in our fact sheets are also accessible to all. So the programs that we saw in the video, a lot of different programs. You saw CAP, PAD, PAT-B, PAMI, which is the program that I am a part of, PAT, PABS, PAIR, PAVA, and PARP. These are all what it means. Remember, the P&A is protection and advocacy, and these are all the individuals and all the different services that we provide. I want to discuss the exact services provided and the types of cases that each of the individuals program take, because knowing what each of the particular programs does is not that important as it is for the people that work for and the people that we work for at DRNY. When someone calls us for help, our intake specialists are going to hear what the issues are that they're facing and decide which of the programs their service request should be assigned to based on the issues the individual is facing. So this gives you a kind of an overview, but when someone calls, the intake specialist will always make sure that that individual is routed to the correct program. And this, generally speaking, this is how DRNY supports people with disabilities. Direct legal representation. So when you look at direct legal representation, we're talking about to all individuals with disabilities under all federal, state, and local laws and regulations for legal issues relating to their disability. We also pursue mediation. If someone just joined, if you could mute, please, that'll be great. Make sure everyone is muted. Thank you. So we also pursue mediation, negotiations, administrative, and other appropriate advocacy to further the civil rights of people with disabilities. As far as technical assistance is concerned, advising individuals of rights under various laws and how to enforce their rights through self-advocacy. And then systemic advocacy, gathering data and conducting investigations on issues that appear to be impacting a group of individuals. For example, investigations of a group home, a prison, or other locations based on multiple complaints of abuse or neglect. Issuing reports on systemic issues such as access to services and agency policies. As far as education is concerned, sharing investigative reports with policymakers, providing comments on proposed policies that may impact individuals with disabilities. And then as far as the outreach side of it, it's conducting outreach like today, where we let people know of the services we provide, which is exactly what my position is. We also do more specifically tailored outreach events, such as our self-advocacy, know your rights trainings on particular topics such as special education, accessibility, and employment discrimination, and the reasonable accommodations process in the workplace, just to name a few. We can also tailor a training to your specific needs if you let us know in advance. And then as far as information and referrals, connecting individuals with resources to address specific concerns and give out a lot of information and referrals. DRNY overall and our intake team really prides themselves on doing our best to help every individual. What I mean by that is if you contact our intake department, we are going to do our best to help you, whatever your issue is. Even if your issue is not something that falls within one of our programs, we can still refer you and still help you to get to where you need to be. Now, does that mean that everyone is going to get an advocate or an attorney? No, but we do our best to really try and understand your issue so that we can try and put you in contact with the organization that may be able to best assist you. That's, whether that's applying for a particular benefit you may qualify for, or for helping you getting in contact with the right legal aid provider. Simply put, if you contact our intake department, we are going to try and help you. The extent of our help will depend on what your issue is and on the availability of our own recourses, but everyone will be served. As far as what DRNY supports, people with disabilities of all ages in a range of areas. And those areas are education, transitioning to adulthood, employment, independent living, access to services. And don't worry about getting all of those areas down right now, because I'm going to explain different ways that we support individuals with disabilities in those areas. Investigations and monitoring are also part of it. So as far as education, help to obtain educational supports and services. We help students with disabilities to get the services they are entitled to under the law. That can be anything from the beginning of the process where a parent thinks their child has a disability. You can mute, please. Please mute. There's someone on, let me find you and I'll mute you. All right, I just want to make sure everybody's muted. Thank you very much. So if a parent thinks that their child has a disability and may need services to a situation where the student has an individualized education plan or an IEP or 504 plan, the school is not implementing it. We do our best to ensure that students are in the least restrictive environment and that they are not being disciplined in school for something that is related to their disability. We can also look at more systemic issues if, for example, a school district implementation or execution are violating all students with disabilities rights in the district. Obtaining educational supports and services, that could be anything from a child who needs speech, language therapy, occupational therapy, or a student that needs individualized attention in a particular subject area, such as reading. Ensuring the accessibility of the student education, that can mean ensuring that the school itself is physically accessible to a student that has a physical disability, or ensuring receiving an education in the least restrictive environment. So basically, it's just making sure that the student is being educated with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. And we're trying to make sure that there is, equity and equality at all levels. Removes from school due to lack of services or discipline. We ensure that students with disabilities are not being disciplined for things that are not related to the disability. And these are some examples. So PAD program. A young man with autism was being denied door-to-door transportation by his school district. As a result, he was required to walk along a busy road to get to and from a bus stop. The parent challenged the district's decision and with the help of the local advocate, won the hearing. The school district appealed the hearing, the office's decision, and we represented the student on the appeal. DRNY filed DRNY filed a brief defending the hearing officer's decision and asserting our client's rights to special transportation under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA, and state regulations. DRNY highlighted evidence of the student's unique needs, including his distractibility and the need for supervision, while the district argued it was the parent's responsibility to ensure the student's safety. The state review officer issued a decision rejecting the district's position as contrary to special education requirements and the student's needs, and ordering the district to immediately commence door-to-door transportation. Just one day later, the parent wrote to us, "Just wanted to let you know that he was picked up at our driveway this morning. I called the bus company and they knew about the changes. I am immensely grateful to all of you. Now I know that my son will be safe and will begin implementing strategies to help him gradually move forward." As far as another example for PAMI, which is the program that I am a part of, DRNY represented a 17-year-old high school student with a diagnosis of ADHD and a mood disorder. The client was removed from school following what the school called a threat situation, which involved the client simply flicking rubber bands from his fingers. Because of the removal, the client would not have been able to take his exams and graduate with his peers. DRNY reviewed transcripts of the client's previous disciplinary hearing and attended the client's Committee on Special Education meeting. DRNY then represented the client as a superintendent's hearing and presented our argument that the disciplinary measures imposed on our client were discriminatory. At the hearing, it was determined that the student should be allowed to return to school so that the student would be able to graduate the following semester. DRNY helped the student establish a class schedule, and the student timely graduated with his peers. So those are just a couple of examples of things that DRNY does, stands for, and advocates for. And please feel free, if you have any questions, to put in the chat. I am monitoring the chat as well. So transitioning to adulthood, transitioning services, DRNY can help consumers get the assistive technology they need to transition from school to their employment. We also help individuals with disabilities to navigate the Access VR and Commission for the Blind process every step of the way. We can help every consumer appeal decisions made by their counselors if they disagree with the decision made by that counselor. It helps them to get the assistive technology that they need transitioning from school to work or to transition to get a better job. May be able to assist if they were found to be ineligible for services with the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, which is also known as OPWDD. We also ensure that schools are following the law related to students with disabilities by providing the required transition services for students age 15 and older. Assist with the transition into workforce or college, the Access VR, which a lot of you might know what Access VR, but it's basically adult career and continuing education services, vocational rehabilitation. It's a New York State agency which helps individuals with disabilities to choose, train for, find, and keep suitable employment. Access VR can work with most people with all types of disabilities, but there is an exception. Access VR does not work with people who are legally blind. These individuals work with the New York State Commission for the Blind, which is the NYSCB. The NYSCB essentially does the same thing as Access VR, but specifically tailored to those individuals that are legally blind. Remember, the Access VR and NYCSB is about services needed to reach employment. If you need something from Access VR to prepare for, obtain, or maintain employment, it must be documented by a medical or treatment provider. Access VR role in your employment search is to help you choose, plan for, and coordinate required services to reach your employment goal. No single service is guaranteed to a person, and all services are determined on a case-by-case basis. As far as DRNY, what we can do is we can help you navigate the Access VR and Commission for the Blind process every step of the way, whether you're just interested in applying for Access VR services, or if you are a counselor and do not agree with the decision they are making, we can help appeal decisions made by those counselors, and we can help if you were turned down by Access VR and then told that you did not qualify for those services. So those are some of the things that we do. Just to give you an example, and examples are always great. I see something in the chat. In Monroe County, we're actually located on State Street, right in downtown Rochester, Nancy. And I'll give the address out in a minute. So an example as far as the CAP program, DRNY represented a 26-year-old woman with a specific learning disability. Access VR agreed to private college sponsorship for the client, but over a year passed without VR's funding being paid to the university. DRNY investigated the matter and discovered the delay was rooted in Access VR's central office. As a result of DRNY's efforts, $38,885 was paid to the private university, relieving the financial burden to the client and her family. So that's just one example of what DRNY was able to do for an individual in our community. Give me one moment. All right. As far as employment, if anyone is refused a reasonable accommodation request in the workplace, or if they're discriminated against because of their disability at any stage in the employment process, DRNY can help. Whether it occurs during the application process, while they're working, or if the discrimination is the reason they're not getting promoted. Helping individuals transition from sheltered workshops to inclusive employment for at least minimum wage, DRNY could assist recipients of Social Security disability benefits, including Social Security disability insurance, supplemental security income, Medicaid, and/or Medicare, in obtaining, maintaining, returning to work, and who are experiencing barriers to their efforts to work. We can also assist beneficiaries who are receiving or trying to receive work-related training and services. Help individuals who have experienced employment discrimination, whether you were discriminated against in the application process to being denied a promotion due to the disability. So some examples of that would be a client that DRNY represented who filed a discrimination complaint with the Equal Opportunity Commission, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, against his employer for failure to provide reasonable accommodations when the client requested the ability to wear special work boots and take additional breaks in order to accommodate his disability. He was placed on involuntary medical leave. DRNY was able to negotiate the client's return to work with the requested accommodations and secure back pay and compensatory damages. Another example, a 33-year-old woman with mental illness and a traumatic brain injury was working as a production assistant in Italy when COVID-19 pandemic hit. Her position was not permanent. It was a contract position and she was left without employment and when the contract ended. Once travel from Italy was available, she returned home to New York City. She contacted DRNY with multiple questions about the Social Security disability insurance, work incentives, and pandemic unemployment insurance or assistance. DRNY assisted her with obtaining unemployment assistance with regard to SSDI benefits. DRNY also identified a nearest work incentive planning and assistance, WIPA program, to help her learn about work incentives and planning her return to work. So those are just a couple of cases or a couple of examples of what DRNY could do as it pertains to employment. As far as independent living, DRNY advocates for individuals with disabilities to live independently. That does not just mean that we advocate for individuals to live independently and productively in the community. That is one of the things we do, but more than that, we advocate for individuals with disabilities to allow them to live with the same freedom and choice as a non-disabled person. So it's not just that you are living on your own or in the least restrictive environment, but that you control where you live and that you have the same range of choices as a non-disabled person. Because I think as human beings, that's something that we all deserve. An example of that would be DRNY represented a client who was a resident at a nursing facility and was experiencing barriers to discharge. The client's sister, who was appointed his power of attorney, had concerns about his ability to live independently in the community. PAIR provided guidance to the client regarding how to withdraw the power of attorney, and the client successfully did so. DRNY then worked with the local independent living center to assist the client in transferring to an assisted living facility where he is now able to enjoy the neighborhood and all the benefits of community integration. So just one example there. Access to services. DRNY helps individuals who cannot access certain buildings, businesses, public spaces that are not in compliance with the ADA, American Disabilities Act. We can ensure that the services being provided by public and private business agencies are accessible to you. DRNY also helps people apply for certain services or point you in the right direction of an organization that can help them apply for a particular service. We also help get the services they need in certain settings when they are unlawfully being denied. Now, I'm going to give you an example. So DRNY filed a federal lawsuit in April of 2020, Martinez versus Cuomo, requesting that the court immediately order the governor to provide American Sign Language interpreters at his live televised press briefings. As we know, in April of 2020, well, a little bit before April of 2020, was when the COVID pandemic hit. And there weren't any American Sign Language interpreters at any of the televised press briefings. On May 12th, DRNY obtained the opinion and order from the district court that directed Governor Cuomo to provide in-screen ASL interpretation at his daily briefings. This groundbreaking district court ruling paved the way for the National Association for the Deaf to obtain a successful preliminary injunction in their ASL case against Donald Trump for not having ASL interpretation at the White House COVID-19 briefings. This injunction relied upon the ASL decision DRNY received against Governor Cuomo earlier that year. The work done by DRNY was far-reaching and ensured that people in the deaf community were able to receive the information that was crucial to their health and well-being, as well as their families. And then as far as investigations and monitoring, basically do investigations and monitoring of schools, hospitals, nursing homes, prisons, and any place that is receiving federal funds and providing services to people with disabilities to make sure that people in those facilities never experience the same discrimination, abuse, and neglect that occurred in Willowbrook back in the 1970s. Investigation and monitoring of schools, hospitals, and nursing programs. DRNY will send out teams of individuals to facilities to investigate them based on receiving multiple complaints about the facilities. I know one specifically that DRNY is currently working with is over at Rikers Island, which is one of the major jails in New York City. So they'll ensure that individuals in those facilities don't experience any of the discrimination, the abuse, the neglect. Based on those investigations, they'll bring lawsuits, create public reports, and use any other appropriate advocacy to ensure the protection of individuals in those facilities. Protect Social Security beneficiaries that require the assistance of a representative payee from financial exploitation, abuse, and neglect. Representative payee is a person or an organization who assists someone who can't manage or direct the management of their own benefits. We review the performance of representative payees through beneficiary and payee interviews, on-site inspections, and a detailed review of financial and other documentation. These reviews ensure the well-being of beneficiaries while educating payees on how to better serve them. An example of that would be an investigation that was conducted through PAMI into whether there is an association between use of restraint chairs in New York County jails and people diagnosed with mental illnesses. DRNY reviewed data from hundreds of incident reports in 2017 and 2018 and conducted in-depth investigations into several incidents from 2016 through 2019. DRNY was able to find that there was a disproportionate use of restraint chairs on people in county jails with a mental health history. People with mental health histories likely experiencing symptoms of acute mental illness are restrained in chairs, often following multiple uses of force and in combination with disciplinary sanctions for the episode leading to restraint chair use. DRNY's in-depth investigations of several restraint episodes show how lack of treatment leads to restraint chair use, often in excess of what may be required to manage dangerous behavior. Based on DRNY's findings, the serious potential for abuse, harm, and even death, and consistent with the United Nations Committee Against Torture's recommendation to ban use of restraint chairs as methods of constraint, DRNY published a report demanding that New York State and counties must take immediate steps to ban their use altogether. So just another example. These are the things that we don't do. DRNY does not provide criminal defense representation, representation in family court matters, such as divorce or child custody, non-legal services, service coordination, job placement, and then SSI or Social Security Disability Insurance appeals. So these are the things that DRNY does not do. If you're looking for any of these services, DRNY can refer you to other organizations or attorneys who may be able to help. So I think the best way that I can sum it up is that whatever issue that you may have as it pertains to any type of disability, DRNY will either assist you directly or DRNY will be able to refer you to the other organization or the attorney that may be able to help. If you need our assistance, this is the way to contact us. Intake staff is available to take calls Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can leave a message, you can send an email or submit an intake form directly on the website, which is right there in front of you, drny.org/page/contact us. The services that we provide, as I mentioned earlier, are free, and all of the information is kept confidential. And then just a little disclaimer, contacting DRNY does not guarantee legal assistance or create an attorney-client relationship. DRNY provides legal assistance on a case-by-case basis and will limit its scope of representation as necessary. If DRNY offers advocacy services, the scope of services are explained through a retainer agreement or by other means. But every service that is provided is free of charge. And then these are the locations. So I know, Nancy, I think you asked earlier. These are the locations, 725 Broadway in Albany, 44 Exchange Boulevard, right here in Rochester, across from the Blue Cross Arena, and 25 Chapel Street, which is in Brooklyn, New York. And then as far as my contact information, this is my contact information here. So you can reach out to me. A lot of you that are on this call are a part of our community. So I see you day in and day out in the work that I do with iBorough and the work that I do with many organizations throughout the Rochester community, and the organization that I am here on behalf of today, which is Disability Rights New York, which continues with my passion for serving the community and ensuring that everyone is being advocated for and is being spoken on behalf of. So with that said, that'll end this presentation. I am going to stop sharing. At this point, if you have any questions, thank you, Elisa. Please feel free to ask. Like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I will certainly try my best to answer any questions you may have. I want to thank you for spending your lunch hour with me, with us today. And I'm hoping that this information, and this is just the beginning of sessions that we'll be holding at least on a monthly basis, that will go in depth and will really speak to what we do and the work that we provide for everyone. Thank you, Will. Will is one of our lawyers on the team. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. If you don't have any questions, we'll end a little bit earlier. Let me see here. Hey, Daniel, if we personally see a situation where the service is being done to individuals with disabilities at a business or agency, are we able to report that? Or does it have to be the client or service recipient directly? That is a great question. I would say that you can still contact us, but Will, since you're on the call, do you have anything, if you want to unmute, that you can also respond? Because I think that you're the expert when it comes to that.
Sure. So hi, everybody. I'm one of the staff attorneys here at Disability Rights New York. So yeah, if there's something that you see at a business or agency, you can absolutely call into DRNY and report it. And depending upon if we get a number of complaints about a particular facility or placement, it may go on a list for us to do an investigation. But if we're going to provide, direct legal advocacy or other advocacy for a particular, individual, we would need to speak with the client. So I guess it depends upon the situation, but you can also then call on someone's behalf if you, spoken with them. But Disability Rights New York can only represent the individual with the disability. So we would have to communicate with them. But if it's like, as I said, if it's an issue that a place is inaccessible or there may be allegations of abuse and neglect, yeah, I would definitely call into us, because if we get a number of those complaints, then we might want to open an investigation. But if it's a particular, single instance, we would need to talk also with the individual with, a disability, because in the end, they would be the ones who need to be our client. But thank you, Julio, and I'll kick it back over. I hope I answered your question.
No, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me take, all right. Appreciate you. Any other questions? Would the DRNY take a look in cases where government organizations are not providing services in the language needed by the recipient? Yes, that would be something that if a client or an individual is experiencing that, then DRNY, that's one of the services that DRNY would provide. Once again, Will, if you want to add to that, please feel free to.
Sure, Julio. Yeah, so I mean, we would, it comes up a lot in special education cases. So for example, if parents need to be fully informed at Committee on Special Education meetings of, the student rights and the things that are going on, the actual language in the statute is the parent's native language. So if they speak Spanish or if they speak Mandarin or whatever it is, if that's their primary language and the district knows about it, they should be providing translators. They can ask for certain documents to be translated into those things. I recently had a case a while ago where we got involved and the parent's primary language was Spanish, but they didn't have any translators at this Committee on Special Education meetings. None of the documents were being translating. And once we got involved, that was all fixed. And there were translators at the meetings and things were being, things were being translated into Spanish. The documents were being translated into Spanish as well. So yeah, those are types of things we could look into, but it would also need to be related to a disability related, issue as well. I hope that helps.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All righty. I want to once again thank you. I'm going to give you some of your time back. So those that spent their lunch, as have I, to communicate this great information. Please feel free to reach out. Many of you on this call know, you know how to reach out to me. For those that I'm just meeting today, please save the contact information. And I'm gonna just put it in the chat right now. But please feel free to reach out. Like I said, if I can't get you the answer, I have a great team of individuals who will be able to get you the answer. And with that, I want to thank you. Wish you all a happy and blessed Thursday. And hopefully you all have a great weekend. And thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everyone.